Whenever I pick up a new piece of gear, I always go for the top of the range option. Now, I know for a fact that I don't need the top of the range option. However, I always seem to come up with 100 different excuses where I need to get the best. In many cases, I wouldn't even consider something that's just a little bit below or even mid-range because, in my opinion, what's the point of getting something unless it's the best that you can get? Now, as I've grown up a bit, as I've matured a bit, I realised that that's not always the best approach to things, and I wanted to put that to the test. You see, whenever I buy Fuji equipment, and I buy all of it by the way, I buy the best I can get. So XH2S, f1.4 primes, all of that kind of stuff. However, what happens if I actually buy the more affordable lenses? So the TT Artisans or the Viltroxes, all that kind of stuff. Is there going to be a huge difference? Now, before this, I didn't do that. I didn't know what the difference is. I immediately dismissed those lenses. However, I figured why not? So before Christmas, just before Christmas, I had some free time. I went on Amazon, I bought a bunch of these lenses. Now, one caveat, Viltrox did send me 2 of their lenses, or the more expensive budget side lenses, so to speak, in exchange for writing a blog. However, they have no say or anything on this video at all. And the purpose of this video is to actually give you my thoughts on what it's like using a premium lens and a more affordable lens, and am I going to change my opinion after all of that use? Just one more thing to keep in mind, please. I am not a tech reviewer, I'm a photographer, so all opinions are coming from a photography standpoint, not a gear review standpoint. So there'll be no charts, no brick walls, no 400% pixel peeping. It will be just real life experience. Let's start with the lenses that I used. The first was the Fujifilm XC35 f2, which costs around £150. Then it was the TT Artisan 27mm f2.8, which is also around 150 quid. The TT Artisan 25 f2 comes in at an insanely low price of £60, but it is manual focus. Then I had the Viltrox 27 and 75mm f1.2 lenses, and although at £400 they're not exactly budget, they are half the price of the equivalent Fuji glass. Now, I'm aware there are a ton of other options. However, I picked these because they seem to be the most popular and the lenses that I would actually use myself. As you can imagine, cheaper lenses will be built to a cheaper standard. Let's take the Fuji XC35. The entire lens is made of plastic. When I say the entire lens, I mean the entire lens, even the lens mount. I suspect, and please prove me wrong in the comments if you have the experience, that after a few years of taking it on and off a camera, that plastic mount will get worn away and maybe the contact might not be as secure compared to a metal mount. The same can be said for the TT Artisan 28 pancake lens. It's a very plasticky feel, and even though the mount is metal, the actual aperture ring, when you turn it, it literally feels like you're grinding plastic on plastic. It's a very unpleasant feel. If you compare that to a Fuji lens or something with a metal build, which has solid, clean clicks, this very much doesn't feel like that. It literally feels like you're just grinding this plastic on plastic with some markings somewhere in the middle. Now, on the other hand, and this is what surprised me the most, is when I looked at the TT Artisan 25mm pancake manual focus lens, the build quality on that was actually insane for the price. Now, at one point I did try a Voigtlander Prime, which was like £600, 10 times the price. Honestly, yes, you could tell the build quality was a bit better, but was it 10 times the price better? I don't think so. And finally, moving to the Viltrox lenses, this is where the build quality jumps up, I would say, to be on par with the Fuji glass. I really couldn't tell the difference in build quality holding a Fuji lens and the premium pro level Viltrox lenses, even though the price difference is literally double. Generally speaking, lenses don't have many fancy features. The only things I did find is that on some of the cheaper lenses like the Fuji, you didn't have an aperture ring. However, on the TT Artisan, you did have an aperture ring. On the Viltrox lenses, they both obviously had an aperture ring. However, one of them even had an auto manual focus switch, which is quite handy, especially for abstract photos at longer focal lengths when the lenses are wide open or close to wide open. Other than that, there wasn't much in terms of different features. Weather sealing, the Viltrox lenses both had weather sealing, all the others didn't, but that's to be expected. This is where we start to see a bigger difference in the glass, even when shooting wide open. However, there are still some caveats. If you take the Fuji 35mm XC lens, which is 150, 160 pounds, despite the body being so cheap, the actual internals are pretty much the same. So when you shoot with that lens, the quality you get is the same as the more expensive one. So even shooting a wide open or f8, f16, it doesn't really matter too much. However, when you look at the TT Artisan lenses, especially the 27mm f2.8 Pancake, when I was shooting that wide open, the halos and the distortions were wild. You can see some images now shot at wide open and the same image shot at f5.6 or f8, I can't remember what it was, but stopped down. The difference is huge. And if you're shooting in low light, then unless you want to have that glow or that weird artifacts in your image, you have to stop it down. So that lens to me isn't an f2.8, it's more like an f4 lens. And the same can be said for the manual focus lens. Now on the other hand, with the Viltrox lenses, honestly, there wasn't any of this shooting at f1.2, f4 or f8. The performance of that lens was good throughout. Autofocus was another separator between cheaper and more expensive lenses. However, there's a huge caveat that's worth keeping in mind. Now, when you look at autofocus glass, there are two main systems. You have a linear motor and you have a older, cheaper stepper motor. Now, between a stepper motor and a linear motor, the jump is huge. So if you take a Fuji 35mm and you compare it to a Fuji 33mm, because the 33 has a linear motor, it's much quicker, it's much quieter, it's more accurate. However, if you take the Fuji 35mm with a stepper motor and compare it to the TT Artisan with a stepper motor, or the Viltrox with a stepper motor, the difference isn't as big as you think. As a matter of fact, when I was using the Viltrox lenses, the autofocus felt just as good as the Fuji 35, the 23 or the 50 or any Fuji lens with the stepper motor. However, the moment you take a linear motor lens, the difference is more noticeable. What my point here is that if you're comparing two lenses with stepper motors, the difference in the autofocus system and performance is not going to be like, wow, it's not going to be huge. However, if you're comparing a linear motor lens to a stepper motor lens, then the difference will be a bit more noticeable. So taking everything into account, saying that budget lenses are crap and expensive lenses are good is not as straightforward as that, because you see there's loads of little caveats. If you don't care about weather sealing and if you don't care about having an aperture ring, I would argue that the 35mm XC Fuji lens is much better value than the XF considering it's nearly, 3 times cheaper and it's actually lighter. So that's something to keep in mind. However, if you say, no, I want to shoot in low light, then the TT Artisan lens becomes, in my opinion, completely pointless, because at f2.8, the entire scene just looks weird with all of these artifacts and halos. However, if you say, no, I only shoot at midday, then you could easily go for that lens, because you're not going to shoot it at f2.8. So the blanket statement of good, bad, etc. doesn't quite apply here. You know, I loved the Viltrox lenses, to be honest with you, and I gave them great reviews in my blog. Why do I not use them at the moment? It's simply because I don't need f1.2, and they were quite big and heavy given the f1.2. However, if I was mostly shooting at night and I didn't really care about the size for travel, I would have personally kept them because they were great lenses, and I would have actually preferred them over the Fujifilm alternatives because they're much better value for money. So when you approach buying glass, buying lenses, don't just assume that if it's a bit cheaper, it'll be worse. And this is more of a lesson for me and then for anyone else, because I always assumed, well, if it's more expensive, it must be better, but it's just not true. So give it a go, try some of these lenses if you can find a rental service, if you can find a way of getting hold of them without having to keep them if you don't like them. And I honestly think that the more third-party people come in, the better it's going to be. I know this video might have been a bit all over the place, it's just like what's in there, just spilled out, but I hope it provides some value and insight to some of you. Anyway, that's all for today. If you have any questions, comments, all that, please leave it down below. And thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye. If you're finding this video useful and you wish to support the channel, then one of the best ways to do so is to check out my Lightroom presets. They're optimized for Fujifilm RAW files, Apple Pro RAW, and they will work with all other RAW formats too. Every photo you've seen from me has been edited to one of these 22 looks as a starting point. There is a Capture One version as well. Finally, these will work both with the desktop and mobile only workflows. For more information, see the links in the description, and thank you for your support.